Okay, guys, here we go. Man, I really look like I look like a serious Jabba the Hutt impersonator here in this chair, the way this camera's lined up. But that's okay. I guess as long as I don't have Princess Leia in compromising situations, um, I'm at least better than Jabba the Hutt. Okay, so let me get this queued up and rolling. Slideshow from the current slide right there. Fake news. Yes, indeed. Okay, we're going to talk about fake news today. There are two definitions of that term. Sorry about that. You know what I love about sparkling water? You can never tell whether it's water or gin. Anyway, so sorry, a little bit of it. Okay, so fake news. Fake news. Okay, there are two definitions of the term, basically. The first one is the one that we hear most often these days, which is anything in the media that the White House disapproves of. CNN is fake news, NBC is fake news, etc., etc. That isn't what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about news that is fake, not exaggerated or spun, but just straight up made up. Like literally fake news, not cheap insult aimed at Don Lemon fake news, but the real, actually fake. Most literal fake news has its roots in satire. Sites like The Onion, which is sort of the OG of satirical news. The Onion has basically always been funny as hell. I don't know when it has not. But even back in the day, sometimes it got taken a little too seriously. I don't think anybody took the mind-blowing out of Cheeto's experience story too seriously. But this one, this is pretty good. Some pretty good commentary here from literallyunbelievable.org. In this particular infographic is that multiple stab wounds are shown to shorten the life expectancy of primates on whom, right, a study was done. And of course we've got these people saying, what, this is beyond stupid, stabbing monkeys, stub, you freaking stupid. Yeah. Hey, The Onion, this post would only have made any sense if there was a petition attached for jailing, or my personal choice would be multiple stabbing these scientists. Okay, somebody doesn't know what The Onion is. That's fairly rare these days, though. A lot of them have gotten even more traction than this. I mean, this is literally unbelievable. It's an algorithmically serviced website where, you know, they collect people responding to The Onion as if it were real. But this one, when it came out in like 2008 or something like that, or maybe it was 2005. This is old anyway. Harry Potter's books spark rise in Satanism among children. A lot of people didn't know what The Onion was yet. The thing is, there are some Christian traditions that see Harry Potter's fun-loving wizard stuff as literally the work of Satan. You know, his dark majesty at work in the material world through Harry Potter. I mean, if you've not, if you haven't been in that culture, it sounds kind of silly, but it is, you know, it's a thing. So when members of denominations like that see an article that they, you know, especially if they don't know what The Onion is, this thing happens in their minds. Confirmation bias. And we've talked about it briefly before. We're going to go a little deeper into it today. Confirmation bias is the tendency to accept information that conforms to what we already thought without giving it a proper looking at. I mentioned literallyunbelievable.org, which is, as I said, worth a visit now and then. It's got some fun stuff on it. But yeah, so moving forward in time, we get to around 2012, and The Onion started getting some serious competition, if you could call it that. Well, The Onion is there to make jokes and be satirically funny, but this new crew of sites was more along the lines of making prank phone calls. They're like, you know, prank yankers or something. The game is to write a story that is not obviously satire, hoping that some news outlet with bad confirmation bias will see it and want to believe so hard that they pick it up and go. Well, it works great. First, the Washington Post picks up a story about Sarah Palin taking a job at Al Jazeera, and then the New York Times grabs a story about Kanye West boasting that his butt is banginger than his wife's in allegedly an interview on WGYN Chicago. And of course, they got Breitbart too with a story on the Daily Current that said that Paul Krugman was filing for bankruptcy. Paul Krugman being an economist, a left-leaning economist. Actually, he's substantially left-leaning economist who writes for the New York Times as an opinion columnist. I should add. Well, okay. Something else started happening here, and it wasn't lost on the Daily Current show. They were having fun playing with people's confirmation bias. Oh, ho, ho, isn't this hilarious? These guys wanted to believe so badly that Paul Krugman was full of doodly-doo that... Doodly-doo. They were so badly to believe that Paul Krugman was full of shit that they bought this obviously fake story. This is great. This is fun. Hey, what's that in the corner? Oh, it's a cash register, and it keeps going ding, ding, ding. These guys were making tons of money. When people took these things seriously, they clicked through them. Some of them clicked on the ads that they had served up through Google AdWords, and soon the Daily Current was making a very nice profit. And that brings us to Paul Horner, who was probably the most prolific source of fake news on the cusp of the 2016 election. I don't want to call him the most prolific source of fake news to date because, well, time marches on. But here he is. And if he looks a little unhappy in this picture, it's because it was December of 2016 and Donald Trump had just gotten elected, and Paul Horner blamed himself for having helped that to happen, for perhaps having been the deciding element that made that happen. You'll actually hear that a lot. That election was pretty close. Almost anything could have been the deciding thing. Shoot, Jill Stein, James Comey, the emails thing, you name it. Any one of the little kind of 1,000 cuts of the comment about deplorables, any one of those things, take any one of those out and the election goes the other way. So it was really easy for Paul Horner to blame himself because, oh my gosh, if I would have not... Yeah. Now, Paul himself detested Trump and had convinced himself that what he was actually doing was a yeoman's job of making his supporters look like numbheads by feeding them obvious bullshit that they lapped up because of their rampant confirmation bias. Well, that's kind of true, but it's kind of not true too. Some of Trump's supporters were dumb enough to fall for this, but having fallen for it, their instinct was to double down on their belief in its reality. Not to say, oh boy, am I ever stupid. People don't do that. So they doubled down. That's what they do. And in doing so, these few supporters were able to create a shadow narrative that appealed to some of the less dumb supporters. Remember trading up the chain? We talked about trading up the chain in Ryan Holiday's prescription, the Ryan Holiday discussion. Did we do the Ryan Holiday discussion yet? I think we did, but it might be actually coming up. But just in case it's coming up, let me explain a little bit. Ryan Holiday's prescription for trading up the chain was to get your story put on a crappy blog with low standards and then go to a slightly less crappy blog with less crappy standards and say, hey, look, crappy blog is running this story. Isn't that awesome? And then they'll be like, according to crappy blog, blah, 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 blah. And then you trade it up to the next level. And by the time you get, 5 or 6 removed from the source, you've got, I don't know, BuzzFeed or the New York Times website saying that according to the internet buzz, this is happening. And people who want to believe it are like, oh, the internet buzz. Well, that isn't a super reliable source, but I want to believe it, so I'm going to believe it anyway. And I'm just going to forget about saying that it was all according to the internet buzz because, that undermines my argument. I'm just going to say that Hillary Clinton is running a child trafficking operation out of a pizza joint in upstate New York. That's how this happens, right? So it gets picked up by a few low-level idiots. I mean, this is how this fake news thing gets traded up the chain. It's picked up by a few low-level idiots and repeated. Higher-level idiots start quoting low-level idiots. Then people who are not idiots but share the idiot's desired policy outcomes start quoting the higher-level idiots. And the next thing you know, it's going out in a tweet from real Donald Trump. And as you know, most Trump supporters are parroting a bullshit talking point made by a guy I'm sorry, the next thing you know, not as you know, that got real political, but that's unless you believe in Freudian slips, that's just an oops. The next thing you know, after this gets going, most Trump supporters are actually parroting a bullshit talking point made up by a guy who wanted to make them look stupid, and all of them are invested in it. Right? Remember the phrase 500,000 rebels can't be wrong? You probably don't remember that phrase because it was popular in 1860 when, I don't know about you guys, but I was dead in 1860, unless you believe in reincarnation, in which case maybe I wasn't. But it's about the Civil War, right? Newsflash: 500,000 rebels could be wrong as hell, and were, but you sure couldn't tell them that because they were invested in it. And even if they had felt a little lingering suspicion that maybe they were being had, the instinct is to power through that. Well, now, you can imagine what this guy's life was like around September of 2016, right? This is a bit of a spoiler, but it's an important point. He put out some of these bullshit pieces claiming that some protesters were paid $3,500 to crash a Trump rally. Trump's campaign manager picks it up and tweets it out. Score! And it gets mentioned on Fox News. Awesome! They're really feeling stupid now, aren't they? No, they're not feeling stupid. They're feeling vindicated. And they're spreading the word. They're like, finally, it has confirmed what I have known. Those protesters are being paid by George Soros or whatever, right? And they're spreading the word. And a few days later, it's been passed up the chain so far, away from the original story, that when the original story is exposed as bullshit, it has no effect on the traded up ones because they've sort of been sanitized. This is another thing that the Trump supporters have heard, but sounds about like what they've expected. I mean, the story is about, just another thing that Trump supporters have heard, but sounds about like what they would have expected to hear anyway. Okay, so that's going on, right? And you would think that a guy like Paul Horner would be like, oh, I don't like Donald Trump. Maybe I should stop doing this. But that's hard to do when you're making the kind of money this guy was making all of a sudden. Lots and lots of money. Now suddenly he's got a strong incentive to justify what he's doing somehow so he can keep that money rolling in. You can see how this would be slightly uncomfortable for a guy in his position, especially if by some crazy, crazy chance Donald Trump actually wins the election. Right. Well, you know what happened next. Trump wins, and it occurs to Paul that he supplied a lot of the ammunition that got used to do that. Now, he might have done that, but frankly, there were so many factors in the outcome that you can almost attribute its outcome to anything. Like I said, James Comey, Russian hackers, deplorables comments, Jill Stein, gosh, you name it. The bottom line is that maybe this is letting my political colors show a little bit, but you're not supposed to run a campaign and a candidate that is vulnerable to that much stuff and has such low approval ratings among potential electors and just kind of hope everything will be okay because the person who's opposing you is somebody that you think no one in their right mind would ever possibly vote for. Sometimes they'll do that just to tell you to drop dead. But anyway, shields back up. Let's talk about actual bullshit. Paul Horner, not that my political opinions aren't bullshit. I'm not that arrogant. Paul Horner, a guilty conscience is a powerful thing, and he took the fake news thing to a new level. He couldn't have done it, though. He could not have done it without Google AdWords. Towards the end, you could see he fought very hard to convince himself that what he was doing was morally okay. I'm going to go through his story more fully. I'll keep it brief. But by the way, before I start, I have to mention that Paul Horner died of an accidental prescription overdose last year. I think it was around this time. What role his obvious feelings of guilt and depression and remorse over the election outcome played in reducing his psychological robustness to the point where that could happen, we can only speculate. But it did happen, so he's not with us anymore. And, so some of what I'm going to say is going to feel a little bit like dancing on his grave, but, I don't know. I guess you put a nickel in that machine, it runs, and that's the way that is. Horner appears to have gotten into the fake news racket in 2013 when the National Report was founded. The National Report, this is its page. Now, by the time I got around to taking screenshots of all of these things, they were in late stage, they were on their way down. So this isn't the kind of headlines that you would really see in the National Report. This is a post-election report headline. I do think it's kind of interesting too that the way they have cropped that flag basically has turned it into the stars and bars, which is the real Confederate flag, not that battle flag thing that the Dukes of Hazzard piece thing that people stick on their pickup trucks and whatnot. But I don't know whether he intended that or not. But Horner, like I said, 2013 National Report, its tagline is kind of a dead giveaway: America's shittiest independent news source. Probably figuring that would give him enough cover, Paul got busy trying to prank people with stories on his site. The idea being, you'll see it, you'll share it, someone will point out that it came from America's shittiest independent news source, and you'll feel dumb. Which is good, because if you like the story that he's putting out, then you probably are somebody that he thinks should feel dumb. Well, the business model was pretty simple and actually very lucrative. Dupe gullible people on Facebook with deceptively newsy headlines on stories that contain just enough obvious bullshit to let him avoid charges of deliberate deception. And the reason this was so lucrative is because Google AdWords made it possible for the first time ever to fine-tune an outgoing message to maximize its appeal. It provided both a real-time feedback mechanism and an incentive system. So here's how that worked. Say you put out a fake news story that says science proves cat people are more lovable than dog people. It might generate $1,000 worth of clicks from hardcore caddies if you've got a big enough platform. But then you put out a fake news story that says Hillary caught slamming white dope at downtown sleazy biker bar, and it generates $10,000 worth of clicks from hardcore anti-Hillary people. Okay, now you know where to spend your energy to get the biggest bang for your buck. But that's not all you can do, because here's the thing. Some percentage of that $10,000 worth of clicks came from people who believed the story and passed it on in their social media networks, generating more clicks. So what Paul Horner quickly realized was that the closer he could come to believable bullshit, the more of those people would buy it and pass it on. So instead of something ridiculous like this, maybe something more along the lines of Obama signs executive order banning the Pledge of Allegiance in schools nationwide. That was one of his. The goal was to get lots of people to get outraged and click through and share with their friends, I just knew that man was un-American, before looking into it and noticing that it was bullshit. Now notice the URL on that thing, abcnews.com.co. You probably can't see it on the screen, but trust me, that's what it is. abcnews.com.co. What that means is that Paul Horner, and you got to give him props for thinking of this, had the brilliant idea of registering the domain name com.co. And that means that he could set up any number of subdomains like abcnews.com.co and bbc.com.co for an incremental cost of $0.00. .co. And that's so lots of people just assumed it was legit because they overlooked that .co. Oh, NBC News says, yeah. In other words, they did what Stephen Glass depended on his victims doing, figuring that if it's in the New Republic, it must be legit, not noticing how skeezy it sounds because they want to believe it. And as you can see, it worked 2.2 million times. That's a pretty significant sharing ratio, and a pretty significant penetration into a population of only about 320 million people. Not 1%, but close to it. Well, you can see the process, right? We talked about puppies and kitties, we make a little money. We talk about Trump and Hillary, we make a lot more money. We talk anti-Hillary and pro-Trump, we make a lot more. The monetized clicks keep us fine-tuning our message like a playmate, saying warmer, colder while we were moving our way towards a hidden geocache or something like that. And eventually we arrive at the maximum revenue-generating system, fake stories about Hillary doing bad things. The market pressure led us there with inexorable force. But now we have a problem. We're making a lot of money, but we have our conscience to worry about. So we go ahead and write the horribly misleading made-up story, but we tell ourselves that what we're really doing is demonstrating how stupid the people who repeat it are. Even though many of them aren't. They're just so busy they overlooked your tell line buried in graph 7. But that doesn't matter. What matters is you convince yourself that anybody who buys this is dumb, and therefore it's not your fault, right? Well, is that what happened with Paul Horner? We'll never really know. We do know, though, that he was personally devastated when Trump actually won and blamed himself for it having happened, which, I don't think I'd go that far. I mean, remember, the people who were lapping his stories up were looking for confirmation of their already existing feelings. If they didn't get it from him, I'm pretty sure they would have found it somewhere else. But like a lot of people, it never occurred to him that Trump could actually win that election. At least a lot of people who didn't vote for Trump didn't believe that. But anyway, which of course did not include the staff at the National Enquirer. My favorite National Enquirer headline was about the Trumps said was the line was like, how they'll crush their enemies. They're crushing enemies. That's like Conan the Barbarian talk. Anyway, remember the red flag about the Subhumanator? I mentioned that a market develops among people with counterfactual beliefs. Like, let me give you a hypothetical. It's 2005 and I own an oil company and I really want to believe that global warming is not a thing. Yet all the legitimate peer-reviewed studies keep telling me that it is a thing. And then all of a sudden I get my hands on one that says, nope, global warming not a thing. No need to worry. Keep on driving your, 68 Pontiac or whatever it is that gets 12 miles per gallon. No need to worry. A sane person would recognize this as an outlier. It's one study out of 100, but I'm not a sane person because I want to believe. Having confirmation of what I want to believe is worth something to me. Great, but how can I pay something to the scientist who's confirming my beliefs? I could cut him a check, but I'm a businessman. I'm not going to do that. I mean, not only do I like to keep my money, but I also like to stay out of jail. In case you're wondering, I'm talking about his, because this is a real case. Rather than his or her, we're going to be talking about this case during week 8. This actually is a thing. But anyway, I could hire him, but that would look funny. All I can do is talk about his study in Congress and share it with friendly news outlets and generally push it as a source of legitimate doubt on the scientific consensus. So his ability to directly monetize my approval isn't there. No money equals no market equals no problem. And that's why there's only one of those studies instead of 100 in 2005 for me to find as an oil executive. Okay, great. Fast forward now to 2016. This time I'm the scientist, not the oil baron. I produced the study and posted on my blog with Google Ads. My buddy the oil baron sees it. He tweets it. He shares it on Facebook. He spams it out to all his employees. They start sharing it. Everybody who looks at it comes to my blog. Some of them click on my Google Ads. My cash flow starts to pick up. By the end of the weekend, I'm $20,000 richer and making plans for my next skeptical study. And if you don't think that kind of income will enhance my willingness to take shortcuts in my passion to get the right results, trust me, it will. Very few people are really ideological prostitutes, ready to say anything and take any position for money. Very rare for anyone to do that, but almost everyone will try to find a way to get behind a position that makes money for them. If they can do it with a clear conscience, if they can convince themselves that they are doing well by doing good, they'll do it. And they'll pay you very well to assure them that that's the case, even if it's not. So what I'm saying is that Google AdWords has become the monetization engine for dehumanators to reimburse hardworking prejudice ratifiers for their trouble. And that is why fake news has suddenly gone from a funny prank to a deadly serious force in the world. People are making their house payments doing this. And it's not just in-over-their-head pranksters like Paul Horner now. It's an international activity. And I'm not talking about that Russia bullshit either. Well, I don't know if it's not bullshit. I don't know what it is, basically. But I'm not talking about the Russia allegations. I'm talking about Macedonia, sometimes referred to as Macedonia, but I was taught to pronounce it Macedonian. I have no idea which one's right, but I'm just going to do what I'm used to. Here's a little bit more about that. It's become a municipal industry for the town of Veles in Macedonia. This is an article in Wired magazine. I'm going to read it to you because the visual here kind of sucks. The first article about Donald Trump that Boris ever published described how, during a campaign rally in North Carolina, the candidate slapped a man in the audience for disagreeing with him. This never happened, of course. Boris had found the article somewhere online and needed to feed his website, Daily Interesting Things, so he appropriated the text, down to its last misbegotten comma. He posted the link on Facebook, sending it within various groups dedicated to American politics, and to his astonishment, it was shared around 800 times. That month, February 2016, Boris made more than $150 off the Google ads on his website. Considering this to be the best possible use of his time, he stopped going to high school. Right. This is from the article in Wired, which was published in February 2017, about a town in Macedonia that became the fake news factory of the world. The article goes on, quote, "In the final weeks of the U.S. presidential election, Veles attained a weird infamy in the most powerful nation on earth. Stories in The Guardian and on BuzzFeed revealed that the Macedonian town of 55,000 was the registered home of at least 100 pro-Trump websites, many of them filled with sensationalist, utterly fake news. The imminent criminal indictment of Hillary Clinton was a popular theme. Another was the Pope's approval of Trump. The site's ample traffic was rewarded handsomely by automated advertising engines like Google's AdSense. Across the spectrum of right-wing media, from Trump's own concise lies on Twitter to the organized prevarication of Breitbart News and NationalReport.net, Paul Horner's outfit, ideology beat back truth." By the way, that sentence is a party foul. It definitely tells you where the writer is coming from on this. Probably should not, but at least kind of we know where they're coming from. But continuing, what Veles produced though was something more extreme still. An enterprise of cool, pure amorality, free not only of ideology, but of any concern or feeling about the substance of the election. These Macedonians on Facebook didn't care if Trump won or lost the White House. They only wanted pocket money to buy things: a car, watches, better cell phones, more drinks at the bar. Okay, that's the key insight here. These kids didn't care who won the election. They didn't get to vote in the election. It's like they're in there for the ride, right? They're just outside looking in. But the kid who started it actually started it off with an anti-Trump story, and it did okay, right? $150 is almost 2 weeks' wages for the average Macedonian. That's pretty cherry pot of money. That's like probably equivalent to, it would have an equivalent impact on an American, average working American person of about $1,500. But it was when he turned to pro-Trump and anti-Hillary stories that the cash register really began to ring. And so, of course, that's what he concentrated on, because that was what was making the money. Now, most of my friends are left of center, because those are the circles that I run in. And my Facebook feed skews heavily leftist. I can assure you that there was plenty of lapping up of bullshit on the left in 2016. There is most definitely a market for prejudice ratification on the left. So why was pandering to the right so much more lucrative? I don't really know, but I can guess the right saw itself as toppling an institutional candidate. They had to take Hillary seriously because she was a traditional candidate, and they thought she was most likely going to win. The left saw Trump as a joke. I don't know if you guys remember this, but the Huffington Post at one point actually declared that they were going to stop running stories about Trump in the news pages and put them on the entertainment pages because he was so obviously a novelty candidate who was not going to get anywhere. that did not work out well for them. But so the left, seeing Trump as a joke, there wasn't the same hunger for news that would hurt him. Of course, he supplied plenty of that through legitimate means as well. Anyway, that's my theory. Some of my leftist friends would claim that it's because the right is categorically more gullible, but these are the same people who last year or the year before that were lapping up stories about the 6 random idiots who said things like, "I'm on the Affordable Care Act, that's different, it's Obamacare I want to repeal," and misrepresenting them as typical. So, intelligence just doesn't break on political lines. Or if it does, it doesn't break predictably. Perhaps better stated, it's not helpful to try to dope out intelligence differences across political lines. It may make you feel good to think your opponent is an idiot, but it doesn't make that person's vote worth any less. It just makes them less likely to listen to you when you're trying to persuade them to vote the way you think they should. Anyway, at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to wrap this conversation up with a pithy statement, because we've covered a lot of ground here, but this is the money quote. This is what's really important to know here. Google AdWords monetizes and incentivizes the satisfaction of others' confirmation biases and provides acute, key, incisive, insightful insights. That sounded really bad, but you get the idea. really, really targeted insights into how to fine tune your message to confirm them best and make the most money. This is what makes fake news so dangerous. We all have beliefs that we'd like to have confirmed. When they are confirmed, we tend to take action that puts money in the hands of the people who are confirming them, thanks to Google AdWords. It's the addition of that money that has made this also toxic. Google still seems to be trying to figure out what to do about it, or at least they were shortly after the election. I think right now they're just kind of hoping that the problem goes away. I haven't heard anything about it. I don't use Google AdWords. I've tried it once or twice, but not enough people go to my stupid Oregon, goofy stories about Oregon history website to make it worth the candle, so I didn't maintain it. Obviously, I'm doing it wrong, but I don't know if they're still doing. They're looking for an algorithmic solution to the problem, of course, because they don't want to have to hire anybody to do this. But meanwhile, they've quit serving ads to the hundreds of fake news sites that they've identified. But there's nothing they can really do to stop the same people from signing up for a new one tomorrow, especially if they're in another country where they can use a different name. The scammers of Veles are already gearing up for the 2020 election, kind of like me, your next president. Because I'm just there's so many people who are going to it's a real bull market in president aspirations. But yeah, that's a job I wouldn't want in a million years, actually. I've seen how it puts the miles on those guys' faces. Anyway, for the rest of us, our only real defense is to stay focused and aware of our own confirmation bias at all times. And anytime a story pops or is shared on your social media feed, look at the source. If it's unfamiliar, it's probably bullshit. Because now, thanks to Google, there is big money in bullshit. Will they solve the problem before 2020? Maybe not. If they had solved it by now, I think we would have heard something, and I haven't heard anything. We'll see. Meanwhile, I'm going to add a secondary directive to the Prime Directive. You know what the Prime Directive is, right? Know who's talking? Well, the secondary directive is WTF, which stands for Where's the Filthy Lucre? I mean, I could have just go WTM, but that's not nearly as memorable, is it? Well, that brings our Friday lecture to a triumphal conclusion. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please tune in on Monday, same bat time, same bat channel, and we'll have a couple more things to talk about in advance of the midterm, which is scheduled for Friday of next week. So 1 week from today, 20 questions, multiple choice in class. Okay, that's enough of that. I will put this away and sign off. And where is, oh, there it is. Okay, yay. Okay, I've got it up and I'm going to turn it off. Okay, bye guys.